few more coming in here now. Sorry, 1 second.
You're okay. There's no panic. I'm just finishing a cup of tea.
Could do one myself. That time of the day.
Aye.
Right, folks. So look, we'll kick it off. So this is Denis, guys. Denis Coen. He is a mindset coach and motivational speaker. I've had the pleasure of chatting to Denis before with Touring Hurling Club. Very beneficial, excellent at what he does. Like that, he's just going to talk you through a few little tips on, I suppose, just motivation during, I suppose, COVID-19. How to create it. Little tips and advice on goal setting and the importance of setting goals, building routines, and just any tips and advice for just during lockdown and stress, anxiety, all that kind of stuff. So I'm just going to hand you over to Denis, and he's just going to start off. Like that, might have a few questions and answers towards the end, but I'll hand you over to Denis.
Thanks, Joey. Good afternoon, everybody. The neighbour has decided to just start cutting his lawn, so typical. Can everybody hear me, yeah?
All good, yeah, perfect.
Okay, so yeah, so everybody else is muted. So guys, just in terms of what we're going to be talking about today in relation to health, fitness and well-being, I'll be coming from, I suppose, the mind point of view and what brain science has taught me over the last 12 to 20 years. And first, I'd like to start by saying, like, over 2,000 years ago, I always quote the Stoic Greek philosopher Seneca, and he says, we suffer more in our mind than we do in reality. And I'm sure we can all kind of agree to that and comprehend that, because we all have these crazy thoughts, and in the future I have them myself about my kids, or what if that never happened to them. I've had loads of heart attacks, pancreatic cancer, and they never even happened in reality, but we have those thoughts. So that's what he says. And the other philosopher, Marcus Aurelius, if you ever heard of him, he says we've got control over our mind, not outside events. Realize this and we should find strength. So in times like this, especially COVID-19, we can find strength when we start to take control of our own mind. So as Joey says, we'll be looking at the mind, motivation, how powerful goal setting can be in relation to how our mind operates and works. And then we'll have a few questions and a few tips on how we can be hopeful and more confident, more resilient going forward. Is that okay, Joey?
Perfect, yeah.
So where would you like to, if everybody has a pen and paper, it might be, look, I have one myself. I always, because I'm going to learn something new, because we're going to talk a lot of information today, and we don't know where we're getting our information, because we're exposed to, I suppose, more information today on the internet in one day than our great-grandparents were in their whole lifetime. We meet more people in 15 minutes in Liffey Valley Shopping Centre than our great-grandparents did in their whole lifetime. So we're living in a very fast-paced, overloaded information world. So I think it's great to have, if you have something to take one or two notes that you might be able to take away from today, that will help you going forward. Is that okay?
Yeah. So if you want to grab a pen and paper, guys, now.
If yeah, I'll give you 10, 20 seconds. So Joey, we'll probably start with goal setting. I suppose you probably covered a little bit of that with your clients over the few years, have you?
Yeah, definitely. Just like that, their goals, for their health and fitness goals.
Yeah.
So they have something to aim towards when they start off on a plan or a program, or their training and stuff like that. That they're not just training mindlessly. So
exactly.
Just aim for a target.
Yeah. So I'm going to kick off. We'll start with the goal setting, right? And this is what I use when I'm working with clients, and the program I use, I call it the 3x5 Achievers Attitude. So it's the 3x5 Achievers Attitude, and I'll explain it. It can be a bit difficult virtually to do it when you're not sitting with someone and watching them write it. But so what it is, the first thing you do is I suppose you have this big goal, whatever your main goal is, Joey, okay? So you've got to really write that down in detail. So that's the first thing, having the goal, okay? So that's this is the first 5 of the 3. So that's having the goal. The second thing is writing the goal down. If you think it, ink it. If it stays in our head, we can tell ourselves all sorts of lies and say, oh, I didn't really want to do that anyways. So having a journal, making it a live document where you can view it, review it, and it's live all the time until you achieve that goal, whether that goal is a year away, 6 months, 3 months. So having the goal, writing it down is the second thing. Going public. Making yourself accountable. Tell somebody that'll hold you accountable. Some people go public, they go online, they tell, if I decide to write a book, you might go online and say, look, I have a book coming out in 6 months. What a great way to put pressure on yourself to write a book. So writing the goal, knowing what it is, yeah, we said that. Putting it on paper, if you think it, ink it, making it public, and then 3 benefits to you, to your family, to your loved ones. And what would the 3 benefits be of achieving that goal? And number 5 of the first part is the big reward at the end. Write down what you're going to do once you achieve that goal, and you've got to make that reward very big and gratify yourself at the end of the goal. Does that make sense?
Yep.
So the 3x5 Achievers Attitude, that's the first part of the 5, right? That's the first 5, okay? What I would say, guys, in the fitness industry, when you are making goals, rather than being really, really specific, I know people will say, oh, be specific about your goals. But what I like to do is, if you want to lose, say, 14 pounds in 6 months, a better way that, so you don't set yourself up for failure, you could say, I'm going to lose between 11 and 17 or 18 pounds. So you've got a few pounds either side of the actual goal you want to achieve. So that way you don't feel very bad at the end of the goal. So to give yourself some flexibility. If I work with a Gaelic footballer and he's a scoring forward and he averages 4 or 5 points a game, we might say, well, today let's try and improve that, but let's go for somewhere between 4 and 8. So now he's got a bit of scope and there's not as much pressure to say, right, I have to get 6, if that makes sense.
Yep.
Joey?
We froze here. You're back, Dennis, yeah?
Did you miss much there, no?
No, just a couple of seconds there. You're back again.
So I'm going to move on to the second 5. So we have the 3x5 Achievers Attitude, the second 5, yeah? So the second 5 is writing down 5 sub-goals. Now, I call these intentions. They don't have to be goals. What are the 5 intentions that you need to do to achieve this goal? So there's an intention really gets you going. So what are the 5 intentions to help you achieve the big goal? So if you have that fitness goal, that weight loss, whatever it is over a year, now you've got to put in, this can be 3, it can be 7, but I'm just using this as my 3x5 Achievers Attitude. So what are the 5 intentions, your 5 sub-goals? So that's the second part. So that's 2 5s we have, yeah? Now the third 5, between all your sub-goals, you've got to look at these 4 or 5 questions. So the first one is, what's your sub-goal? So we look at the first sub-goal. The question is, right, what's my intention? The second thing is, I believe I can achieve this because, is number 2. 3 is, to achieve this sub-goal, I will, etc., whatever it may be. To achieve this sub-goal, I will do this, I will do that. So that's 3. Number 4, we've got to put a time on it. I will achieve this by whatever date. And finally, 5 again is the reward. We always reward, even during the process, we've got to reward the sub-goals. So there's the 5 questions within your first sub-goal, and you apply them to the other 5. If you go 3, 7, it doesn't matter. But that's the kind of routine and the layout that I would use with clients to get them really concrete and clarity what they want to do. And it's visual, it's written down, it's live, you can adjust it, and it's a very, very powerful concept, and it works well with our brain as well. Have you any questions there, Joey, to clarify that, or did I make that?
No, if you can just go through the second 5 again there, Dennis. Sorry, the first.
So the first 5 is, obviously, the first 5 is your goal. The second part of that is writing it down. Third part is going public. 4 is writing down the 3 benefits to you, to your family, to your loved ones. And 5 is the big reward at the end, whether that's a holiday or a weekend away or buying yourself, whatever it may be. The second 5 then is the 5 sub goals. So we just need 5 intentions as part of the plan of the big goal. These are the 5 things I need to do to reach my big goal, yeah?
Yeah.
And within each sub goal, within each intention or sub goal, we've got those 5 questions. What is my intention is number 1. 2, I says, I believe I can achieve this sub goal because. 3, what was 3? I says I will.
This sub goal, I will.
Yeah, to achieve this sub goal, I will do this and that. 4. Have you written down there?
Sorry, yeah, I will achieve this by a certain date.
Certain date. We need a time just to keep us accountable. And 5 again is a smaller reward.
Reward, yeah. Okay.
So there's a reward on the process. So it's something to keep us motivated.
Yeah, perfect.
Okay, so that's goal setting. In terms of the brain and the mind, guys, I just want to give you a 5-minute, I suppose, introductory session on the mind, because we're taking 2,500 years of research and we could be talking for years about it. So just in terms of our mind, we have a conscious mind, which is the newly developed part of our brain, the prefrontal cortex or the neocortex, whatever you want to call it. And that developed it reached its current size and current intellectual capacity about 300,000 years ago. Although there was a big gap between the 300,000 years until we learned how to draw and write and maybe speak, which was only about 75,000 years ago. So we have the new brain, which has evolved to make us think, pay attention, and to be able to write goals, look to the future and look to the past. But then we have the primitive brain, our old brain, our reptilian brain, which is millions of years old. And the purpose of that, believe it or not, its first function is to make us move. It's designed for us to move, because if we can't move, we don't survive. We'll be eaten up, we'll be taken out of the world. So the primary function of the physical brain is to move. So that's why we've evolved, we've adapted to move, if we can, wherever possible. Reptiles used to eat their own offspring because that's the only way they could survive themselves. But then we developed an emotional brain, the second part of our brain, and that's what we'll be looking at today more so. And then the third part of our brain, the conscious brain, evolved. And there's always kind of a fight between the conscious brain, my goal, should I go to the gym today, will I not, and the primitive brain. The primitive brain just worries about survival. Is this going to hurt me? So an example might be, for me to go up on stage and talk in front of 500 people, your primitive brain might be saying, oh, hold on, Dennis, you've never done this before. You're going to feel awkward, where your conscious mind might even try to get you out of doing it as well. So there's always kind of a struggle between the unconscious, let's say, and the conscious mind.
Cool.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. So the thing about changing habits, let it be fitness goals, whatever, is we have become creatures of habits over the years. I don't know what the average age is of everybody that's on here today, but by the time we're 35, 95% of what we do, our behavior, is habit. So once we create habits, they're very, very difficult to break. They become like steel cables. So habit, from a brain point of view, is just a neurological network in your brain that you've processed and ran over and over every day of your life. And it becomes very strong and very hard to break, as I said. Whereas when you're starting off with a habit, they're like cobwebs. we can tear them apart. So we take any addiction, drinking, gambling, it doesn't matter what it is, whether it's chocolate, food. It's within a psychological point of view, it's the networks that we're creating in our brain. And we need to, when we're changing habits, we've got to outgrow those. And to outgrow those takes a lot of time. People will, you probably heard 21 days to change a habit. Well, it's anything from 40 days to about 700 days. So you're looking at anything between 2 years to change a very, very strong habit that you might have been doing a whole lifetime. Is everybody with me?
Yeah.
So I just finish up the conscious mind and the unconscious mind. The unconscious mind is where we store all our beliefs, our habits, our limitations, our dreams, our values, anything that we don't think about. So they're all there. We were very influenced as young kids and teenagers by the media, by our parents, by school. And we've developed these traits and personalities over years. And that's when we say, oh, I've always been this way, I can't change. But if we want to change if we want to change our future, we cannot change it with the same personality, Joey, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
We cannot create a new vision by being the same person. We've got to change as well. So we've got the conscious, the unconscious, and then we've got the analytical mind is the one that really stops us from achieving. We're always analyzing, am I good enough? I don't believe I can do this. What if I look bad? So when we were young, the conscious mind was the master. The conscious mind learned all new stuff, and then it became unconscious, and then your unconscious mind became your master, and we live on automatic and autopilot every single day. And when we're on autopilot, we get out of bed the same side every morning, we grab the same cup of coffee, we drive the same way to work, we take the same route back, we take our shoes off at the same place, we watch the same program, we go to bed, and we do it all again the next day, the next day, and the next day, and we don't even think about it. And that can be powerful because it helps us survive. The unconscious mind says, hey, keep doing that. You've done that every day. You're still alive, so let's do this. This is working. But it's not good if we want to change and we want to achieve something great in the future. So just 3 or 4 things about the unconscious mind, and we'll move on from there. The unconscious mind, unlike the conscious mind, doesn't know the difference between what's right or wrong. It will carry out the action no matter what. It's, as we said, it's autopilot, it's automatic. It doesn't know the difference between what's good or bad. Only you as a conscious human being knows what's bad and what's good. The unconscious is just a doer. It will do whatever you tell it. The unconscious mind doesn't know the difference between what's real or imagined. So we all know, we've all watched movies where we've been watching and we might get emotional and start crying and find it very upsetting, or we might be in a fearful state. That's because the unconscious mind doesn't know what's real or what's imagined. It's a biological system that our body it happens automatically. And finally, this is important for when we're speaking and coaching our kids or coaching athletes. It doesn't matter. The unconscious mind doesn't know the difference between do or don't, Joey. I don't know if you remember me going through that with you many years ago.
Yeah.
So if you tell somebody not to do something, so I can see Breda here on my screen. If I say, Breda, don't do this, I'm still putting the image in your head. We create, as human beings, we create images all the time. How you think and how you feel determines how you behave. And between that thinking and feeling, you will create an image, a movie of some sort. And you won't even notice it, but it's there. So if we take my 7-year-old Serica, and she's going out the door, and I say, Serica, don't bang the door. All she creates is the image. And she's banged the door, and I go, didn't I tell you not to bang the door? So what must I say to Serica? I must reframe the way I talk to her. I say, Serica, can you please close the door gently? And that makes my command a bit more, I suppose, easier for her to comprehend, because she creates the image of the door closing gently. And just to reinforce the concept of the unconscious mind not knowing the difference between do or don't, if I was to ask everybody that's on here today just to lower their gaze for a second and not to think of a big white elephant. So for the next 10 seconds, don't think of a big white elephant. Isn't it amazing how we can create an image of something that doesn't even exist, a white elephant? And I told you not to think about it. When you go to somebody with your problems, sit down there, I'll be with you in a second, don't worry about it. I'll be back in a minute. You're going to worry about it. So learning how to control our brain and make it work for us and guide it in a direction of things we want to happen is very, very powerful. And we do that through images. So we need to remember the way we think, the way we feel creates what we do, how we behave. And then what happens, I call it the loop of insanity. We think, we feel, and then we feel, and then we start thinking the way we feel. So oh, you're telling yourself, I feel tired. So then you start to feel tired, and that's sending a signal to your brain that you're tired. So it's a loop, thinking, feeling, feeling, thinking, and it's the loop of insanity, and it stops us from doing all sorts of things in the world. So that's just a little bit about the mind, and hopefully that'll make a bit of sense as we go on and talk about more things on the virtual talk. Have you anything to say there, Joey?
Yeah, no, just I suppose any bit of experience on that is, like, I've heard a lot on like imagery and all that kind of stuff. What you see is what you do, like, and stuff like that. And yeah, I do remember that from a couple of years back.
Yeah.
So yeah, definitely helped.
And people will ask me, is it just about being positive? You know, just think positive thoughts. No, well, that's not going to work either, because if you're thinking and feeling is different. If you decide tomorrow I'm going to be positive, and for the last 20 years you've been very cynical, and you know that's not in your personality, well, then there's going to be a clash. So your feelings and your thinking have got to be the same. So for me, it's about helpful thinking versus unhelpful thinking. So the question you're always asking yourself is, are my thoughts helping me? If they're helping me, good. Are my thoughts unhelpful at the moment? Well, then if they're unhelpful, we need to do something about it. We need to change them. Can we stop thinking? No. Because as we says, the primary function of the brain is to move. The primary function of your mind is mind wandering. Your mind will always be having thoughts because of the neural networks that go on in our brains. So we don't want to change that, if that makes sense. Even the greatest monks that have meditated for 30 or 40 years, they can't stop thinking, but they can control their thoughts and they can guide them. So, and we can change our thoughts. So if you're watching a movie, Joey, and you're really fearful and you're a kid, right? Here's an example, and it's dark in the house, your parents aren't at home, you're 12, okay, and you're on your own, and this big scary movie comes on. What do? You like turning off the television isn't going to make any difference, because you can still hear little noises and go, oh, I wonder what that is. Because just like our brain, we can't turn it off, but we can switch it. Just like the movie, we can switch the channel. So if you put on a comedy, it directs your focus to really focus on the different movie. Because we all know about multitasking. People think, oh, we're great at multitasking. No, we're very, very poor at it. We can only really attend to one thing at one particular time if we really want to give it great focus. The multitasking thing is just a myth, as the psychology research has shown.
Cool.
Does all that make sense?
Yeah, definitely.
So, has anybody got any questions, Joey, or does?
Yeah, I just unmute everyone there.
Send it up there.
How's everyone? We all good?
Yeah, good.
Does anybody need anything clarified? Okay, I think I'll continue. So if there's nothing coming.
Yeah, we'll continue on. Yeah, perfect.
Yeah.
We might do a quick question and answer that again at the end, guys. So.
Okay. So here's the three last.
Oops, sorry, I've lost you. 1 second now.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, sorry, I had you on mute there, Dennis. Sorry. You're off
okay. I put myself back on. Okay. So finally, and we'll wrap up the whole brain. The whole brain thing is and the mind. So we've 30. Depends on the research. We've 30 to 60,000 thoughts a day. So that's a lot of thinking. And that's important for us to know. Like, our thoughts will come and go. Sometimes you might feel that you have the same thoughts at the same time every day. That's, again, the habits building. So 30 to 60,000 thoughts a day. 50% plus of our thoughts are negative. And we evolved with negative thinking because it helps us survive, if that makes sense. We always have negative thoughts. Crossing the road, wondering if a car is going to come, is a negative thought. Holding onto the banister going down the stairs. All these little negative thoughts are survival mechanisms. So that's why I prefer the helpful versus the unhelpful thinking rather than the positive versus negative. Yes, optimistic. It's great to be an optimist. But negative thinking has its place for us to survive. And finally, as I said it earlier, the third thing is 90% of the thoughts we have are the thoughts we've had the previous day. And that's powerful when you learn that, you know, we've got to change something if we want to create a new reality. So I'm just going to move on to motivation. It's probably a question I get a lot, and sometimes I find it very hard to motivate myself. Just because I'm in the business of psychology doesn't mean that I don't have feelings and emotions, that I don't get angry with my kids, or that I don't have negative thoughts. Of course I do, but we try to limit them and not experience them as often as we don't want to. So what is motivation, and how do we stay motivated? Well, we already talked about goal setting, guys. Goal setting is very, very powerful. The first thing I would say, to keep you motivated, if you've got that live document. And the one thing I would say is, within that document, in terms of motivation, instead of having everything positive, and we've got to look at maybe something like, if this, it's called the if this then this plan. If this happens, I do this. Because there's going to be challenges. And when them challenges arise, you've got to have little strategies to get you back on track. So we all have this ability and talent, yeah? We're all capable of going to the gym. We're all capable of turning up, whether it's a morning class at 6 o'clock or it's an evening class at 8 o'clock. We have the ability to do that. So that's not the issue. So people won't come to me saying, Dennis, can you walk me to the gym? So the ability is never the problem. It's the motivational part. So when we have this ability, our motivation determines whether we do it or not, if that makes sense. So your motivation, or how you feel today, will decide whether you do your workout this evening, or whether you have a takeaway or a healthy meal. So ability determines what we're capable of doing. Our motivation determines if we do it or not. And then our attitude. So when you are motivated and you get to the gym, or whatever your goal is, your attitude determines how well you do anything. So you can come on here today and just listen and not take any action. You can go to the gym and just go through the motions. But when you go to the gym with intention, it can become very powerful. So we've got the ability, we've got the emotion, our motivation, and we've got the attitude. So there's two motivators. When we look at all the research, there's thousands of literature out there on motivation, but it's broken down into two simple traits. We're either motivated by desire, or we're motivated by fear. So you know, Joey, what happens when you desire something? We move towards it.
Towards it, yeah.
Yeah. But when you fear something, you move away. You even watch a kid that mightn't want to eat the dinner or the supper you gave them, they'll push it away from the table. We'll always push away something we don't want. So if you have a habit or an addiction of overeating, one of the strategies we might use with a client would be you move, the simple act of pushing the plate away from you when you're finished, whether it's half full or whatever, pushing it a couple of inches away from the table gives you the reptilian brain the signal that I don't want that, I'm finished with it. And if that's not working, well, then just pour loads of salt over the dinner, and you buckets of it so you don't eat it. So
give it to the dog.
Give it to the dog. So it's just having little tools, the what if scenarios. You know, people that fear spiders, they move away from them. They don't move towards them. So have you the desire to achieve something? And when you have that desire, then you go back to your goal setting and you get writing it down, getting very creative. It becomes really, really powerful, because we've got so much stuff in our heads that we don't know, as I said, we don't know where we're getting it from, and we need to declutter the mind. And I've used this opportunity, COVID-19, to declutter the mind and getting stuff done, writing a list, hundreds of things done that I wasn't getting a chance. And that's stuff around the house, decluttering presses, whatever it may be, doing the gutters, the lawn. There's loads and loads of things. If you were to stop and write a list, the list will go on. And when you clear that list, you just get this relief and you feel better. Your mind starts to quieten. So that's, in terms of motivation, that's all we really need to know about it, is that there's desire and there's fear. So what happens if you don't have something to strive towards in the future? Well, that can make life kind of very challenging. So here's a concept I would use. Here's something really to write down. What are you really, really curious about? If you were to try and list 10 things that you were very, very curious about. Now, really curious about in the world, whatever it may be. And then break that down into 3. And then really, if you're looking for something to do for the rest of your life, you can break it down into 1 thing. And that's a process I went through about 20 years ago. And I was curious about performance and the human mind. And another one of my interests would be the universe. But my real passion is the brain. So I'm curious about the brain. So curiosity drives your passion. So when you're curious about something, you're like, I'm passionate about that. I want to really find out more about that every day. I want to teach people. I want to coach people how to do it. So your curiosity becomes your passion. Your passion gives you a purpose in life. And passion and purpose drives what? Motivation. So when you're not motivated, you've got to remind yourself, what's my passion? What's my purpose? What are the consequences if I don't do this today? And there's always a consequence, whether you do something or you don't do something. We don't have to do anything in life, but there will be a consequence. There's a consequence if we don't pay our taxes. There's a consequence if you eat junk food all week and don't train. There's a consequence if you don't go to the toilet and you just sit in the chair and go to the toilet. But we don't have to go to the toilet. We don't have to pay our taxes. We don't have to be healthy, but there will be a consequence down the line. And the powerful thing about fitness and the brain, Joey, is that in later years, being active, being physically active, whether it's in the gym or going outdoors, I'm not just saying it's about the gym, it's about being physically active. It stops us from getting several chronic diseases. It prevents premature death. So why wouldn't we exercise? We're designed to move. And that can be yoga, it can be Pilates, it can be Tai Chi, whatever. There's no point doing something that makes you feel horrible every day as well, you know? So it's got to be something that fits your personality, something that you like to do. The second thing, I suppose, about the brain and exercise, the first thing I says, yeah, it gives us, I lost my thought there, is, what was the last line I was on there? I know people have probably tuned out as well.
Your consequences.
Oh no, in terms of health, preventing chronic diseases,
yeah,
and premature. So that's a real good benefit to it. The other benefit of exercise and physical activity. And you don't have to run marathons. You don't have to be a triathlete. Just getting out for a fast-paced walk will stimulate new neurons in your brain. Okay, so creating new neurons creates new life, it creates new images, it creates meaning, and then it prolongs the death of neurons. And neurons are just cells, if I'm losing people. So, and it prolongs the death of the cells that we have in our brain. So it stops Alzheimer's, whatever it may be. So because our brain takes in 20% of the oxygen we take into our body, and it takes 20% of our energy as well. So we're not just fueling the body, we're actually fueling our brain. And the older we get, it's very, very important that the nutrients and the oxygen intake into our brain, it's vital. Are we okay there now, Joey?
Yeah. Very good.
Okay, so that's motivation. What do you want to move on to next?
Yeah, I suppose just what I had on the list was just kind of tips and advice on how to maybe anxiety and stuff like that for with quarantine and lockdown and stuff. But I think it's pretty much like you've it all covered there, really. Like,
yeah. So just to finish off the last topic, what I would say is, I use the pond analogy. It's the ripple effect. You know, when you throw a stone into the water and it ripples out and it grows and it grows and it grows exponentially, it can go at a fast pace depending on how big the lake. And it's the same for human beings. But a lot of us don't even throw the stone. And if you don't throw the stone, there's never going to be a ripple effect. There's going to be no growth. So it's actually taking the courage to take the first step to see that growth and that ripple effect get bigger and bigger.
Take action.
Taking action, and that's what I call throwing the stone. People say, and when they do it, you know, clients have said to you, geez, I wish I'd done this 5 years ago. I didn't realize it was going to be so fun, whatever it may be. So taking action and going after what you want to achieve, whatever it is in life, and finding that passion and that purpose. And this has been a great time. I know it can be stressful, people with not having jobs, but if we just sit there, we're going to get eaten up. So let's use our time, let's get creative and start creating the future we want. Yeah. I'm just checking us for time. Okay, we've about 10, 15 minutes before questions, Joey. So I just move on to the stress and the anxiety part of the relationship between stress, anxiety, and how we behave. So a question I would get often is, what's the difference between fear and anxiety? So if people want to, you know, is there a difference between fear and anxiety? Well, fear is the automatic biological response. It's automatic, it's a biological response to a current threat that's happening to you right now here. So whether you're going down the street and you're attacked by a dog or someone robs you, whatever it may be, it's real. That fear is real and it's current. Whereas in anxiety is the prolonged effect of stress, of fear, of worry. And it can be prolonged into the future for days, for weeks, for years, and even thinking about the past. So while both of them have the same consequence on the body, one can be imagined, even though fear can be imagined as well, but usually fear is real, it's happening now. And when we're anxious, so let's go into some of the chemicals in the body. What happens when you work out? What chemicals are released?
Endorphins.
Endorphins is that, yeah. So endorphins very powerful for our mood, for our happiness. So what the four main chemicals, and a chemical is released from the brain into the body. Every time you have a thought or a feeling, you release chemicals. So if you have a negative thought, you release negative chemicals into your body, and that chemical is cortisol. So what's cortisol? Cortisol is a very powerful, helpful chemical or hormone when we get into that flight or fight situation, yeah? Cortisol is released to heighten our awareness, to dilate our pupils and our lungs so we can breathe faster. And that sends through the body to give us the strength to survive and to get away. But with stress and anxiety, we're dripping cortisol into our bodies every day, and that is not healthy. And over time, that becomes chronic, and sometimes we break down physically and mentally because of the bad chemicals not being flushed out of our body. So that's what anxiety can do to us from a chemical point of view. So learning to decrease our anxiety and having tools to deal with anxiety is a good way of stopping the cortisol from constantly running through our body. It's not meant to run through our body constantly. 15, 20 minutes until we get out of that flight or fight situation. If you ever watch any of the nature programs and you see a lion chasing down a deer, yeah? And this chase could go on for 2 hours. Both of them are in flight or fight mode, yeah? Both of them are heightened awareness. But what happens after it's all over? The lion will walk away, calm and collective. Within minutes, the deer is grazing on the grass and as if nothing happened. But what do we do as humans? We think about it for days, for weeks, for months. And even a compliment, if somebody gave you a compliment and you aren't sure whether they're being sarcastic or not, you might even think, fret for days, which is, I wonder what he or she meant by that. And that's the conscious mind, what it can do to us. Whereas in the animal, the primitive brain, they just get over it and they move on and they're alert for the next situation. But us humans, unfortunately, why the mind is so powerful to help us create things, it can make a hell as well, and we can think fearful things throughout our whole life. As I said at the beginning of the talk, we suffer more in our minds than we do in reality. So the two systems at play, Joey, you know this from the biology, is the parasympathetic nervous system, which is when you're relaxed, and the sympathetic nervous system is when you're in that flight or fight. So how do we get into the parasympathetic nervous system? How do we activate that to stop the cortisol and to get relaxed? Well, things like working out, to release those chemicals, dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, and, as you said, endorphins. And dopamine is a chemical, we hear the happy chemical, but dopamine is a chemical that's released on the anticipation of something going to happen, something good. So maybe when you were young and you scored your first point, you've had a flush of dopamine. What a great feeling. I want to do that again and again. You have your first drink, let it be drugs, your first gamble on a horse, and you win. You get a release of dopamine. But you'll hear all the greats say, after the Henry Shefflins, after winning the All-Ireland, the feeling only lasts for seconds, that elation. But the journey and the dopamine that's being released, the anticipation of trying to win it is more powerful. So when your phone goes off in your pocket, it's not who's on the other end of the phone, it's the anticipation of who it's going to be before you look at it. And that floods the dopamine, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So dopamine isn't the reward, it's the anticipation of the reward. So when you're setting goals, that dopamine, going to the gym, it's a feel-good chemical, it's a happy chemical. Dopamine, oxytocin is the love chemical, another happy chemical, and we're suffering at the moment because we cannot be with our loved ones, we can't hug them, we can't cherish them, and to actually physically hold someone releases oxytocin. Going to the gym in a group releases oxytocin. It's the herd mentality. When your baby cries at night looking for food, your newborn baby, it releases the other chemical, cortisol, the bad chemical, until it's fed, and then it stops releasing it. It's a survival mechanism. And finally, back to the other two happy chemicals, serotonin, and Joey, as you mentioned, that endorphins, that feel-good factor after working out. So that's kind of the biological aspect of what's happening when we're anxious, when we're stressed, or when we're in flight or fight. And you probably want to know, well, what can I do now? How can I get into that parasympathetic nervous system, that relaxed state? Well, simple things like taking a bath. Believe it or not, taking a bath relaxes your muscles. The body sends a signal to the brain that everything's okay. just even if we're sitting here now and you focus your attention, if your feet are touching the ground or your bum is touching your seat, if you even focus on the sensation of that happening, that takes your mind out of the external world, and even that alone can stop you from getting anxious. And then maybe you don't want to become a master meditator within one day. You cannot meditate for an hour if you've never done it before. So if you try and do 1 minute, so if you can just join me for 1 second, if we can do, before we finish up, if we can do just 1 minute of a mindful meditation. So what we're going to do is we're just going to sit, yeah? If everybody's sitting, or if you're lying, it doesn't matter, or standing. So if you sit with your back straight, relax your shoulders, okay? And when we breathe, we need to breathe from the stomach. If you watch a baby breathe, if you lift up their, in bed at night, you'll see their stomach will rise because they breathe from deep within their stomach. When we breathe up here, we're in flight or fight. We're in escape mode. So nice and relaxed breathing from the stomach. And we're going to lower our gaze, and I'm not going to talk. So I'm going to take a minute, and we've got to focus on our breathing. And if your thoughts go away, come back to your breathing. So we're going to try and stay with our breathing for 1 minute. Even a minute can be difficult, but that's where the practice must start. 1 minute a day, or 1 minute 3 times a day. So with me, if we just lower our gaze, we breathe in for 5, out for 5. And we might even breathe in, 1, 2, 3, 4, calm. Breathe out, 4, 3, 2, 1, relax. Calm. Relax. And if I can just bring you back, that's the parasympathetic nervous system at its best. Relaxed, no fear, no anxiety. And that's strongly correlated. That little mindful meditation is strongly correlated with helping your anxiety and your stress. If you found even 20 seconds there where you weren't thinking about the external world, yeah, and you could really focus on your breathing, with practice it becomes better. But for that 10 seconds, you became no body, no one, no thing, no place, no time. You just became pure conscious with the universe, with the world. You were just a conscious human being. There was no future, there was no past. There was just the moment, the present moment. And that's what we talk about, about being. We are called human beings for a reason, not human thinkers or human future or human past. We are human beings to be here right now. So little exercises like that can decrease our stress. The other thing I said is declutter the mind. You know, getting a list of stuff to do, whatever it may be. Different things from different people, Joey, depending on who I talk to.
Very good.
So we've covered, there's a lot of information, so I hope people, I know you're recording it. We've got 10 minutes, so if there's any questions or...
Just going back on the, I suppose, the dopamine and the anticipation of the reward, Dennis, like,
yeah,
I suppose I'd try and bring that into, I think slowly people start to realize that in the gym as well, like that they want the reward of getting to a certain weight, or, and then I always say as well, and what will happen when you do hit that weight, or if you do fit into whatever those genes or whatever, or blah, 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 like, I mean, like you enjoy the process far more than the reward. You enjoy the endorphins of going to the gym and feeling good, and just because you get that reward at the end, like it's not as fulfilling as what you think. It's more the process of it.
Yeah, and you're right. It's the process, and at the end, then we need something else to get us going again and to release the good chemicals like dopamine, whatever it may be. But at the moment, what I would say, guys, is in this current situation, I know it's challenging, but there will be opportunities in it. But what I'm finding is some of our needs in life have been kind of threatened, and we all have the need for survival. We all have the need for, we have safety, yeah? We've got a house over our head. We have food, which is good, yeah? So we have safety, we have food, and we have a place to live. But the other needs, such as connection, that's been violated. Although we're connecting virtually, that physical connection has been violated and can cause us stress because we're not releasing that oxytocin. The other thing is contribution. We may feel like we're not contributing to society or to our families at large because we cannot get to them. So you've got connection and contribution. Certainty has been violated. The mind will always search for completion, and we don't have that certainty about what's going to happen, and that can make us very, very anxious. You could just be going to bed some night and you start to watch something on TV and it's 10:30 and all of a sudden it's 12:30 and you're like, God, Jesus, I needed an early night. But the mind opened up a loop of what you started to watch, and until you found out what happened, it couldn't close that loop. So at the moment, we can't close the loop. We don't have the certainty. So that's been violated, if that makes sense. And then variety. Maybe we're not getting enough variety. We only have our back gardens to move around in, whatever it may be. So there's the fourth one. And then growth. We may feel like we're not growing. So there's the 5 needs outside of the safety and the place to live and to be able to eat. And variety, people like I like a lot of variety, so I've got to really use my creativity and imagination at the moment. And that's challenging, but it's good. So for me to wrap up, Joey, what I would say is, going back to the first thing I said, it's about how can we learn to take control of our mind? So there's 4 things, and I call it BET, B-E-T-H. So if you remember your Aunt Bet, in times of when my own sister Louise suffers from bipolar, and she's had anxiety since she was 21, she's 46 now. And when you go off the scale of anxiety into panic attacks, which she had many, but over the last few years, without the medication, she's starting to be able to deal with them because she's aware of them coming on. And she applies these 3 or 4 simple things that I'm going to talk to you about. And it's called my Aunt Bet. My breathing. So we need to focus. Where's my breathing at? Is it deep? Is it relaxed? Is it shallow? Try and have an argument with your spouse when you're relaxed and you're breathing. You can't do it. You have to increase your animation. You have to increase your energy. Your heart rate has to increase. But if you're just there relaxed, it's difficult. So your breathing, your emotions. We didn't talk about emotions today, unfortunately. An emotion is an energy. An emotion is the end product of a past experience. So if you keep replaying the experience, you will have the same emotion, whether that's good or bad. So that's E. T is our thinking. Are we in control of our thoughts? Are they helping us or not helping us, I said. So that's B-E-T, B for breathing, E for emotions, T for thinking, and H for our heart rate. Now, when you're breathing, and if you can bring your heart rate variable down to 50, to where you're relaxed, in control, where you're curious, well, then you've got control over your whole biology and your psychology. I know it sounds simpler for me to talk this stuff than do it, but if you can start being mindful of this stuff when you get into situations where you become stressed, anxious, worried, well, these are very, very helpful. But they have to be practiced over a long period of time.
Cool. Excellent. Thanks very much, Dennis. I'll just ask if anyone has any questions. I'll just unmute you all.
No problem.
Secondary up on his page.
Oh yeah, guys, if anyone has any questions for Dennis before he finishes up, just shout now. Everyone enjoy it?
Yes, very
Yeah.
good. Very.
Very good.
Guys,
Very good, thanks.
no, just so if there's no questions, if you want to follow me on Facebook, Joey can put it on your WhatsApp, whatever. But it's
Yeah.
Denis Coen Elite Mindsets. Over the next 60, every 3 days, I'm going to be doing a 1-minute mental coaching tip. So I'm putting this out public now because it's part of my goal. So I'm going to be doing 60 of them. So you're going to, at the end of it, you're going to have an hour of coaching with little 1-minute nuggets. So there'll be reminders in there. So if you follow me on Facebook, Instagram, whatever it may be, just put in Denis Coen or Elite Mindsets, Denis Coen Coaching on Instagram, and then you'll be able to stay in touch. And I'll be drip feeding little nuggets on my coaching philosophy while the pandemic, until this is over.
Excellent.
Brilliant. Brilliant. Thank you.
So
Great.
no
Thanks,
questions,
Denis.
Joey? We're all happy. No questions?
Okay.
Shout now, guys, if you have any questions. It's no problem.
I think I'd be only repeating myself. We did go through a lot of information.
Yeah, there's a lot there, definitely.
Yeah, people can digest it.
Like that,
I
I've
suppose.
recorded, guys, as well, if you just want to listen over to it again, if you're not sure or missed out on anything or tuned out.
Okay.
Very good. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Thanks a million, Denis.
Brilliant,
Joey.
everybody. Look after yourselves and look
Okay,
after your
guys,
loved
thanks.
ones.
And you.
Thank you.
Yeah, take care. We talk to you. We'll see you.